The room fell silent. Lauren Carter raised his glass of bourbon and stared at the grand oak doors of the Blue Ivy Lounge. His voice, calm but resolute, cut through the murmur of the elite crowd. "The next woman who walks through that door, I'll marry her." A few guests chuckled, others watched in disbelief, and then the doors opened. He froze, and so did everyone else. No one moved. The woman at the door looked nothing like the others in the Blue Ivy. Her clothes were stained and oversized. Her sneakers were falling apart, and her eyes, tired, wary, like someone who hadn't been truly seen in years. Lauren didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He simply stared at her, as if something inside him had just snapped or clicked. His best friend, Ethan Brooks, leaned in and whispered, "Tell me this is a joke." But Lauren shook his head. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't drunk. And he wasn't backing down, because in that split second, something shifted in him. A lifetime of expectations, pressure, and curated perfection cracked open, and what poured out was madness, or maybe truth. This is the story of a man who made a promise in jest and ended up changing 3 lives forever. But right then, Lauren had no idea what he had just set in motion. 12 hours earlier, Lauren Carter had been staring at his own reflection in the penthouse bathroom of the Carter International Hotel. His face was clean-shaven, his tie perfectly knotted, his cufflinks shining. And yet, the man in the mirror looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix, the kind that crept into your bones when nothing in your life felt real anymore. He had everything. At least on paper. CEO of a multi-billion-dollar hotel empire, luxury homes in 3 countries, private jets, front-row seats at every gala and art auction. And yet, there was a hollow space inside him that no amount of success seemed able to fill. His father had passed away the year before. A hard man, strict and traditional. "The Carter legacy passes from father to son," he used to say, except Lauren had no son, just a daughter, Emily, 17, brilliant, brave, and fiercely independent, but not, according to his father's archaic beliefs, fit to inherit the empire. Lauren had never agreed with that, but the old man's voice still echoed inside him. Loud, relentless. His marriage to Claire, Emily's mother, had crumbled years ago under the weight of his silence. Claire had begged him to choose family over legacy. He hadn't listened, not then. Now Claire barely spoke to him, and Emily, she tolerated him, but he could see it in her eyes. He'd already lost her. That night, at the Blue Ivy Lounge, Ethan tried to cheer him up. They drank, reminisced, mocked the business headlines, until Lauren dropped the glass on the table and said, "I'm done waiting." Ethan looked confused. "Waiting for what?" "For fate. For life to surprise me. For something to change." He pointed to the door. "The next woman who walks in, I'm going to marry her." Ethan laughed. "You're out of your mind." "Maybe," Lauren said, "but I'm serious." And when that woman, Jessica Monroe, stepped through the door, everything Lauren had ever believed about control, image, and perfection began to crumble. Because in her eyes, he didn't see pity or fear. He saw someone else just as lost as he was. And that's when everything started to unravel. Jessica Monroe hadn't planned on walking into the Blue Ivy that night. In fact, she hadn't planned on walking anywhere near downtown. But the wind had turned cold, and her usual shelter spot had been blocked off for a city event. The restaurant doors were open, the warmth inside leaking into the street. She just wanted a place to stand, somewhere dry. She didn't even see him at first, but Lauren saw her. She froze under the chandeliers and stairs. The room recoiled. Whispers erupted. A hostess rushed forward, her smile frozen and forced. But then Lauren stood, and everything stopped. He crossed the room, each step echoing against polished marble floors. "It's okay," he told the hostess. "She's with me." Jessica blinked, not sure if she was being mocked or rescued. "Would you join me for dinner?" he asked, extending a hand. Her instinct was to run, but something in his tone, steady, low, almost tired, made her hesitate. She took his hand. Rough, cold, calloused fingers met manicured ones. They sat in silence for a while. Lauren ordered 2 glasses of wine and asked for a menu she couldn't read. "You don't have to do this," she muttered. "Neither do you," he said gently. "But here we are." Over the next hour, they talked. Not much. Just enough for him to learn her name, and that she hadn't always been homeless, that she once worked at a bookstore, that her mother died when she was 16, that life unraveled fast after that. And Jessica learned nothing. Lauren didn't talk about himself. He just listened. It was the first time in years anyone had done that for her. The next morning she woke up in a luxury hotel suite, alone. Her clothes had been washed and neatly folded on a chair. A note was on the bedside table. "Come downstairs if you want breakfast. No pressure. L." She stared at it for a long time. Part of her thought she was being played. Another part, one she hadn't heard from in years, felt safe. Lauren wasn't sure what he was doing either. All he knew was that something had shifted. He wanted to help her, maybe fix her, maybe fix himself in the process. He took her shopping, bought her new clothes, paid for a salon appointment, hired someone to coach her in etiquette. But somewhere between the kindness and the control, something began to break. Jessica looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the woman staring back. And Lauren, still chasing some ideal version of what this was supposed to be, didn't notice her slipping away. He thought he was rescuing her. But what she really needed was to be seen, not remodeled. And he still believed, naively, that he could make it all work. Jessica hadn't said much in days. She attended the etiquette classes. She nodded through conversations with stylists and image consultants. She smiled politely when hotel staff brought room service to her new suite. But the spark was gone. The woman who had walked into the Blue Ivy with tired defiance now moved like a ghost wearing borrowed skin. Lauren didn't see it, or maybe he refused to. He was too busy managing optics. He called his PR team to get ahead of the narrative, paid for controlled articles to frame their story as a bold humanitarian act. Behind closed doors, the board of his company was livid. His daughter, Emily, found out through headlines: hotel heir dating homeless woman, romance or scandal. She texted him only once. "Who are you even trying to impress?" It hurt more than he admitted. One night, he brought Jessica to a black tie gala, convinced it was time to introduce her to his world. She wore a dress that fit too well, heels that made her stumble, makeup that erased all traces of who she had once been. They barely made it through the entrance before whispers started. Someone laughed. Someone else said, "How sweet. A charity case with a tiara." Jessica heard every word. Lauren didn't, or pretended not to. Back at the hotel, she stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her reflection blending into the skyline. "I don't belong here," she said softly. He was halfway through removing his tie when he heard her. "Of course you do," he replied quickly. "You just need time." She turned, eyes clear, voice steady. "No, Lauren, I don't. I never did." He approached her, confused, reaching out. "Jess, we're just getting started. Things are messy now, but—" "Messy?" she snapped. "This isn't messy, it's fake. All of it. You turned me into a project, like you could build me into someone worthy." "That's not true." "Then tell me something real," she challenged. "Tell me why you're doing this." He hesitated. She shook her head. "Exactly." She left that night, quietly, no drama, no yelling, just silence, and the soft click of the door closing behind her. The next morning, her suite was empty. Her new clothes were folded neatly on the bed, her phone untouched. No note. Lauren sat on the edge of her bed, surrounded by everything money could buy, and none of it mattered. He didn't go to work. He didn't call Emily. He didn't answer Ethan's messages. That night he stood on his penthouse balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand, and stared out at the city that once felt like his kingdom. He thought about his father. He thought about Claire. He thought about the look in Jessica's eyes when she said, "Tell me something real." He had nothing, no words, no one, and for the first time in his adult life, Lauren Carter felt completely and utterly alone. And you? Have you ever pushed someone away, thinking you were helping? Have you ever tried to fix what wasn't yours to fix, only to end up more broken than before? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs right now. 2 days passed before Lauren could bring himself to touch anything she left behind. Her presence lingered in the suite like a faint perfume. Impossible to place, harder to forget. He wandered the room, looking for something. He didn't know what. On the nightstand, folded beneath a receipt from the salon he insisted she visit, he found it. A torn piece of notebook paper, scribbled in rushed handwriting. "Thanks for seeing me. Not everyone does. J." Loren sat down, the note shaking in his hand. It wasn't a goodbye, it wasn't angry, it wasn't even about him. It was the most honest thing she'd ever given him. He read it again and again. "Thanks for seeing me." And that's when it hit him. He hadn't seen her. Not really. He had tried to fix her, polish her, parade her, all the while missing the only thing she truly needed, to be accepted as she was. That night, he went back to the Blue Ivy, sat at the same table where they first met, and just watched. Couples laughed. Strangers kissed. A woman dropped her menu and apologized in a whisper. No one saw her. He thought about how easily people become invisible, how easily he had become invisible. To his daughter, his ex-wife, himself. Lauren didn't know where Jessica had gone. He didn't know if she'd ever come back. But for the first time, he didn't think about chasing her down or making her see his side. Instead, he thought about what she'd shown him and what he could do with that. He didn't want to change her anymore. He wanted to change himself. He left the lounge that night without speaking to anyone, but something inside him had shifted. A quiet resolve. He didn't know if it would work, if it would matter, but for the first time in a long, long time, he wanted to try. The next morning, Lauren showed up, unannounced, at a local shelter, not with cameras, not with a press team, just him, in jeans and a plain jacket, standing awkwardly at the front desk. "I'd like to volunteer," he said. The man behind the desk looked him up and down. "You sure you're in the right place?" Lauren smiled faintly. "Pretty sure." He started small, sorting clothes, serving meals, listening to stories. Most people didn't recognize him or didn't care. He met a man named Roy who had been a construction foreman for 20 years before an accident took everything. He talked with a former nurse who battled addiction after losing her license. Every story chipped away at the wall he had built around himself. These weren't people to be rescued. They were people with stories, with histories, with dignity. Jessica had never told him her full story, but now, in every voice he heard, he found echoes of her and of himself. In the evenings, he returned to an empty apartment. Sometimes he sat in her old room, the note still on his nightstand. He hadn't heard from her. He didn't expect to. One night, Ethan called. "You okay?" his friend asked. "Getting there," Lauren said. "What are you doing with all this, really?" Lauren hesitated. Trying to become someone worth staying for. It wasn't about Jessica anymore. Not entirely. It was about Emily, Claire, himself. A few weeks later, he used company funds to quietly launch the Bridge Project, a program offering transitional housing, job training, and mental health support for people coming out of homelessness. No press releases, no headlines, just action. But even as he moved forward, doubt crept in. He still hadn't told Emily, he still hadn't forgiven himself, and in the quiet moments, he still wondered where Jessica was. 3 months after Jessica left, Lauren sat alone in a back row of a small community center. A panel was being held on homelessness and rehabilitation. Local leaders spoke, social workers shared insights. Then a soft voice took the mic. "I'm not a professional," the woman said, "but I know what it's like to be forgotten." He froze. Jessica. She stood at the front of the room, not in heels or designer clothes, but in jeans, boots, and a worn olive jacket. Confident, clear. "I don't have all the answers," she continued, "but I know this. The problem isn't just poverty. It's invisibility." The room listened. So did Lauren. "I was given a second chance," she said, "but not because someone saved me. I walked away from that." He felt the weight of her words. "I found strength when someone saw me, but didn't try to rewrite me." He understood. She wasn't angry. She was free. She never mentioned his name, and he didn't approach her afterward. He waited outside the center, unsure. What if she didn't want to see him? What if he was only reopening a wound she had finally healed? He reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over her contact. Then it lit up on its own. "Jessica Monroe is calling." He stared at the screen, breath held, then answered. "Hey," he said, voice trembling. "Hi," she replied. Quiet, calm, a pause. "Can we talk?" They met the next evening in Lincoln Park just before sunset. The air was crisp, and the city around them buzzed with the quiet rhythm of normal life. Dogs barking in the distance, a jogger's footfalls, a child's laugh. Jessica sat on a bench beneath a tall maple tree, her fingers twisted together in her lap. Lauren approached slowly, as if walking through water. She looked up. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," he replied, breath catching. He didn't sit right away. He stood a moment, as if unsure he had permission to exist in her space. Finally, she patted the bench beside her. He sat. They were quiet for a while. Then Jessica said, "You look different." He laughed under his breath. "Yeah, well, I feel different." She turned to him. "I saw what you've been doing, the shelters, the program. You didn't do it for the cameras. I did it because you were right," he said, his voice raw. "I didn't see you. Not really. I just saw who I wanted you to be, who I needed you to be, to fix something in me." She didn't interrupt. She let him speak. "And I don't know if I'll ever stop being that guy who tries too hard to control everything. But I'm working on it. I'm learning to let people be who they are, even if that means not being in my life." Jessica looked down, the weight of his words pressing between them. "I didn't walk away because I didn't care," she said finally. "I walked away because I did, and because I couldn't keep losing pieces of myself to make someone else whole." He nodded. "I get that now." She glanced at him. "So what now?" "I don't know," he said. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted to say that I'm grateful. You changed my life." Jessica studied his face. He wasn't polished anymore. He wasn't posing. He was just him. Real. She stood, and for a moment he thought she was leaving. But then she turned and offered him her hand. "I'm not promising anything," she said, "but maybe we could start with a walk." His smile was small but genuine. "I'd like that." They walked side by side down the gravel path, not touching, not talking much, just moving together. And 2 days later, Lauren Carter walked back into the Blue Ivy Lounge. Same table, same waiter. Only this time, he didn't come alone. Jessica stood beside him in a simple navy dress, no makeup, hair loose. Every head turned. And Lauren reached for her hand, not to show her off, not to make a statement, just to let her know he saw her. All of her. They didn't get married right away. In fact, they didn't even use the word relationship for months. Instead, they took long walks, cooked dinner together, sat in silence on park benches. Sometimes they fought. Sometimes they didn't speak for days, but it was real. And that made all the difference. Lauren started seeing Emily more often. At first, it was awkward. Two people used to avoiding each other, but little by little the walls came down. They talked about books, about music, about her plans for college. One afternoon, she handed him a photo. It was the three of them, Lauren, Jessica, and Emily, laughing over takeout on the floor of his apartment. "You look happy in this one," she said. He smiled, tears in his eyes. "I am." Jessica eventually joined the Bridge Project, not as a spokesperson, but as a coordinator. She helped write policies, she trained staff, she created safe spaces. She didn't change who she was to fit Lauren's world. Instead, they built something together. A new space, a new rhythm. Not a fairy tale, but something honest, something earned. And Lauren, for the first time, stopped chasing legacy. He didn't care anymore if his last name stayed on buildings. He cared that his daughter was proud of him. He cared that Jessica smiled when she walked through the door. And he cared that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally become the kind of man worth standing beside. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone is the freedom to stay exactly who they are. Maybe you've been on one side of a story like this. Maybe you tried to change someone, thinking it was love. Or maybe you were the one asked to change. What if, instead of fixing each other, we just chose to see each other? Truly see. If this story touched something in you, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. Even if it's just a sentence, your words might reach someone who needs them more than you know. And if you believe that love doesn't mean control, that people are worthy just as they are, leave a like, share this with someone who might need it, and subscribe, because we still have many stories left to tell. Sometimes all it takes is one decision, one moment, one person walking through a door to change everything.